meeting.
Good morning and welcome to Training Tuesday offered by the Chief Procurement Office for General Services. We're going to go over our Training Tuesday agenda for today. We have our updates and reminders, and we're going to go over the making of a solicitation, additional training opportunities, and end things with our Explore More. CPO Notice 2026.02 will be issued has been issued. It was issued on September 2nd, and it's in regards to small business contracting. As noted in the CPO notice, the Illinois Procurement Code requires agencies to provide a compliance plan and an annual report. As a reminder, agency reports are due by September 19th, 2025, and that is this Friday. Solicitations are maps of where the starting point is, how to provide a response, what the agency will review, how an award will be made, and the final outcome that the agency needs to get to. As you are building your map, you'll need to consider and include the time frame for responses, contract requirements, mandatories, desirables if you are issuing a RFP, which is a request for proposal, pricing, and award structure. Making sure to address each of these will assist you in creating a successful solicitation. So, small purchases should provide vendors 3 to 5 business days to respond to the request for a quote. IFBs and RFPs by law have to be published for a minimum of 14 calendar days. If an agency has a complicated procurement, meaning several mandatories or desirables, or requests for mock-ups of the requested supplies or services, then the agency should consider if they would receive better responses or potentially more competition if a greater amount of time is allowed for responding. This is something to discuss with your SPO prior to submitting in bid by for publication. When determining how long vendors should have to respond, you'll also need to consider if a pre-submission conference, sometimes referred to as a site visit, would be beneficial to responding vendors. There are two types of conferences, mandatory and optional. Dependent upon what the agency is soliciting, will help to identify if one is needed at all, and if so, which type is best suited for this procurement. For either type of conference, make sure that you define where the vendor is to report to the conference, what time, if there are any potential delays they may encounter at your site, like a security stop, if they have to be pre-approved by a background check before coming onto the agency's location, if there is a limit on how many people can attend due to space limitations, or anything else regarding their attendance. Whether you've decided to do in-person or virtual, mandatory or optional, if you have a pre-submission conference or site visit, you must complete the pre-submission conference sign-in sheet. This is a requirement of CPO Notice 2020.03. So, contract requirements. When do you need the supplies or services? Agencies have an active need when they are issuing a solicitation. It is generally assumed that the agency needs delivery as soon as possible after the contract is executed, but assumptions are not a part of the contract. The agency needs to specify in their solicitation when the supplies or services delivery should be. This may be delivery schedules. For instance, the agency may need delivery of 2,000 widgets the first of business day of each quarter, or it may be a larger project that has milestones that have to be met and accepted throughout the contract term. Additionally, it may be simple one-time delivery, but has to be completed by a certain date. This can definitely be the case towards the end of a fiscal year, and the agency is assuring that delivery happens by a certain date, or else that year's fiscal funding will not be available for the contract and would have to roll over to the next fiscal year budget. When can the vendor perform work? As important as it is to have the milestone, deliverables, and final delivery date included in the solicitation, it is also important to alert the vendor when they will be able to work. Do you have a high traffic public area where deliveries can't be made during peak times? Are you soliciting for a consultant and you want available during your normal work hours? Will you also have them observe state of Illinois holidays? These are all questions that you need to think about. Where does the vendor have to perform the work? Along with the time frame, you will also need to tell them where they are to be at while they are providing the supplies or services. Can they work remote when providing services? Do they have to be on site at the agency? If so, will they need to pass a background check prior to being permitted on site? And who has the responsibility during performance? It is critical to the success of the contract that the vendor and the agency both have clearly defined responsibilities. Without responsibilities of all parties clearly defined, it can create lags and frustration between the agency and the vendor. In these situations, we often see requests for a change order or scope creep because of the undefined nature of the contract. Clarity of responsibility can help avoid issues. Some mandatories. It is easy to identify a mandatory requirement because these require the vendor to perform that specification. We generally see the language must, shall, and will used to clearly define them as mandatory. If a vendor fails to meet a mandatory requirement, they will be disqualified if it is a small purchase, and they would be deemed non-responsive for an IFB or RFP. It's very important to assure that your mandatories are clearly defined so that your agency can confirm if the vendor meets the mandatory with certainty. It's very important not to be overly restricted in the mandatory requirements as well. When identifying your mandatory requirements, it's important to ask if you could still use the supplies or services without the mandatory as you currently have listed. For instance, if you're purchasing a vehicle, it would be important for it to have a sun visor. However, differing dimensions or color of the sun visor would not necessarily be a reason to not purchase the vehicle. We also see several procurements that are for services. In these specifications, we often see specific titles that the agency needs accompanied by the qualification of that title. We understand in several cases that the agency would like the person in that title to have some experience so that they are able to work independently on the project they are being assigned. However, please provide your SPO with supporting justification, such as a published job title, that are similar to what the agency is seeking to show that this is the standard. Desirables are used for requests for proposal. We utilize desirables to prompt the vendor to tell us how they will meet the agency's need. Desirables also use permissive language, such as should or may. Although you may really need to see how the vendor will provide a report, but you want to evaluate their ad hoc reporting capabilities, then you would utilize a desirable and ask that they explain and provide examples of their ad hoc reporting capabilities. Overall, desirables will be evaluated based on what was requested, the intended use as defined in the RFP, and the vendor's proposal. Pricing is another element of our solicitation that must be included. Per CPO Notice 2022.08, the agency must use bid buy for vendors to provide pricing. In limited instances, it may be appropriate for an agency to utilize a pricing attachments to collect the vendor's pricing, but this deviation from process would have to be approved by the SPO. When issuing a solicitation, we need to make sure that the pricing is set up in a manner that is consistent with the industry. For instance, if we are asking for pricing to be submitted as a cost per perpetual license fees, but the industry no longer offers perpetual licenses and has moved towards unlimited subscription offerings, the agency is likely to have a failed procurement because the vendors will not be able to provide pricing as requested. Or if a vendor does provide the pricing as requested, the pricing may be extremely cost prohibitive because, again, it is not how the industry charges for these supplies or services. You will also need to align your pricing so that it matches the solicitation. If you are asking for a new system implementation, training and training materials to be provided, and then yearly maintenance of the new system, we would expect to see pricing related to each of these areas. You will also need to assure that the pricing matches the terms of the contract. This means that if you have renewal terms identified in your solicitation, you will need to collect renewal term pricing as well. Whenever you are creating your pricing lines, it is best practice to group like items. If you have regions or groups of items that fall under a category, place them under that category. So if you have canned goods as the overall group, it would be best to have lines for corn, green beans, baked beans, pineapple, pears, and so on. Next, you might have your group as dry items, such as rice and noodles. If you don't have groups of these types, you should still consider keeping all of your initial term items together and then renewal line items together and in the same order. Award structure. In the solicitation document, you must clearly define how the award will be made. There are a few different methods that we commonly see. These include award by line item, where each line item will be awarded, award by group or region. As we discussed on the last slide, it may be appropriate to split pricing by a group to get all canned goods from a vendor. In other instances, it may be the best choice for the agency to award by region of the state. And total cost. And that's where we look at the total cost of the pricing provided. When awarding a small purchase or IFB, we will be awarding to the lowest cost, responsive, and responsible vendor in any of these pricing scenarios. In RFPs, we generally see total cost used the most frequently. The vendor with the lowest cost receives the most pricing points. However, it does not mean that they will be the awarded vendor. The solicitation must clearly outline how many points are available for technical, commitment to diversity, and pricing, and that the award will be made to the overall highest scoring vendor. We encourage you to take our Procurement Training Academy specifications course to learn more about effective specifications. The specifications course is also a prerequisite to take our Procurement Methods Invitation for Bid course. Please make sure to visit the CPOGS Training Center for more training opportunities. We'd like to highlight our Bid Buy System on-demand trainings, and these are available on the CPOGS Training Center website 24/7. The Bid Buy registration form refers to CPO Notice 2025.04. This notice requires that the requesting user to have completed the Diversity and Inclusion in Procurement training prior to being able to gain access to Bid Buy. In order to access the online on-demand training, please refer to CPO Notice 2025.04. The CPOGS Procurement Training Academy offers 6 courses that are approved by UPPCC for contact hours. Registration is required. Please visit our training center for all upcoming training dates. And we did just recently release some new dates, so if you haven't checked in a while, now would be a great time to get over there and get yourself registered. Now let's take a look at this week's Explore More. This is Matheson State Park, a geological marvel renowned for its canyons, sandstone, bluffs, and waterfalls carved by water erosion. Often considered a quieter alternative to nearby Starved Rock, it offers extensive hiking trails through forest, prairie, and canyons. The park is a paradise for geology enthusiasts and nature lovers, with opportunities for picnicking and observing abundant plant and animal life. Give us a like or a thumbs up if you've spent time navigating this park. I've been there and it's lovely, and if it ever would rain, it'd be a great time to go see the waterfalls. Okay, so if you have any questions, please send those over to cpogs.training@illinois.gov email account, and we'll do our best to get you an answer. Thanks so much, and have a great day.